And we're live. Hello and welcome to another episode of HEX Therapy Live. I'm your host, Maddie Allen, with special guest tonight, Nerd Girl 007. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Maddie.
Yeah, everybody hit the like and subscribe button, share this out. I think Nerd Girl said she's going to be taking questions during this. And I guess we have some things to unpack after the HEX conference. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
So what was like for people who didn't catch your talk, can you give us like an overview of what it was that you were presenting about in your talks?
I gave two different talks. The first one, and they gave them back to back, even though they were very, very different subjects. So the first one was using sex and relationships as a as a metaphor for cryptocurrency. And the other one was the sociology of hexagons and the pulse chain subcommunities.
Right. And so which one got like more blowback, would you say?
I feel okay, so for one thing, I did not read the comments at all. So the only things that I've heard are things that have come at me directly or things that other people have shared with me were said in closed groups. And I mean, I have friends in all of the groups pretty much. There's at least someone who knows me everywhere. So I hear a lot, you know? I feel like it was it was kind of split in both directions. Like some people, there was a lot more praise for the sociology talk, I felt like, which surprised me because the other one was so fun. And like, actually, I know that it was controversial and that some people don't like, using, I don't know, sex or relationship terms, but I kind of hoped, and apparently incorrectly believed, that people would see the value in it because it makes a dialogue about a subject that is really hard to broach with people who aren't already involved. So it's not and you could use these metaphors with just about anyone who wasn't in cryptocurrency to help them understand some complicated concepts.
Yeah. So I wonder if like that topic was more foreign to people or more of like a new idea than the idea that there's like these subcultures that go to war every day.
maybe, but actually, I really wanted to know what you thought, because there were a couple of times you came up in between the talks, and then you came up at the end of both of them, and the look on your face, I was like, did I do something wrong? Like, I don't know what I did, so I really wanted to know what you thought too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I thought they were standout talks because it wasn't the same thing as we've always had. And that's one criticism that the HEX conference has gotten among many is like, oh, it's like, it's always the same thing every year. Well, this year it wasn't all the same thing. And your talks like were a big part of that. So that was cool. Yeah, I'm not sure if my reaction was like to your content specifically or if there was like something I was trying to juggle in the background, but yeah, I could see how like I could have come up looking shocked or something, after especially like the relationship one, you had like a bonus segment or something. So
yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, the thing is that like I think that it's important to make content that's relatable to people beyond the people who you're already speaking to. And I realized
Right.
most of the people who attended the HEX conference are already part of the ecosystem to some degree, but there have to be times when they're trying to explain things to other people that it doesn't make sense. And I'll actually tell you who this was like the most helpful with. Like, this idea was born because I was talking to the Highest of Stakes team, and they were asking like, how can you explain arbitrage. How do you explain, in terms that anyone can understand? How do you explain, liquidity bonding? And I started using all of these examples, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is like brilliant. This is how you onboard people." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Which is funny because I had already been writing content like that for a while because it was just how it computed in my brain.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and certainly I wasn't aware of all the articles and topics and framing that you had put around crypto, because I think you are reaching an audience outside of kind of where I'm paying attention. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm paying attention to different spheres of influence too, and not just because I'm trying to onboard them or anything, but just because I am personally interested in things that go beyond cryptocurrency. And so as I pay attention to those areas, right, then that impacts my work within cryptocurrency.
Right.
Yeah.
Has your view of crypto changed a lot, like, over the years?
Yeah, I mean, well, so my view of cryptocurrency hasn't changed, like as a system hasn't necessarily changed, but my view about the industry that surrounds it has definitely changed as I've been, deeply embedded within like the belly of the beast, So my view about the industry that surrounds cryptocurrency has changed a lot, and my view about what commonalities cryptocurrency holders and supporters have in like what people share in common has changed a lot as well.
Have you been following any of like the recent ETH drama?
Yes. Yeah. So I sometimes co host and help book a recurring X space called The Aggregated that's hosted from QuickSwap's channel. And our topic for not this week, but next week is about the Ethereum drama. So yeah, I definitely pay attention to that. Mm-hmm.
Do you think Vitalik getting a girlfriend is that part of what caused all this, or is that just ancillary?
I don't know like that it caused this, but I don't know why people are so upset that he changed his profile picture to a milady. I like that's one thing that I haven't put the pieces together on why that directly has upset people because what does it matter?
Like, so I think like at the same time that he was doing that, he was like quoted as saying that like we will continue the like the feminized WEF soy boy mentality or
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
Um, like, and he used those words, um, as in altogether, I see it as a movement of him picking, he is picking the leadership of the Ethereum Foundation in order to direct it in a way that is like quote
Feminine.
unquote anti winning and against price appreciation. And so you're seeing like a lot of OG Ethereans, like kind of, I mean, they're freaking out because he's saying he doesn't really want to focus on the price.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like that's not super different from old school Vitalik, like what Vitalik was talking about in 2016 and 17. And like Vitalik and Ethereum being more left leaning liberal than like the Bitcoin crowd is not different at all. Like the Bitcoin, it's always been kind of Bitcoiners are more likely to be conservative or right wing, and like Ethereum people tend to like this is what the World Economic Forum is on the Ethereum Foundation. So I feel like that's not a huge change, and people just freak out over everything, right?
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, that's part of like the whole psychology of infighting then, right?
Mhm. Yep. But I mean, like, I think that the Ethereum Foundation or maybe Vitalik directly supported, the candidate who didn't win in the US election. So it's like weird to me to be surprised by this. And also,
Right.
the price performance of the token doesn't necessarily have a direct reflection on what the founder wants and never has.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. Like, even like the whole idea that he stepped up and said like, well, yeah, it's not decentralized, like who's in the Ethereum Foundation. I'm the one who picks it. Like, and in the future it'll be a DAO, but like for now it's me. That was also, but again, yeah, I like hear your
Not a
broader
change.
point
Not a
that
change.
it's all the same as it always has been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think like specifically how it like this discussion probably pertains to Hexicans and people who are watching this stream, in that like at the same time Richard tweeted something about that the community wasn't doing enough to support and market for Ethereum. So maybe that's where people are like within this community are upset by it. I don't know.
yeah, well, I specifically find it amusing that like the Ethereum crowd has like the same type of infighting that we do.
Yeah, less publicly usually, but yeah, because like for with us, like all of the dirty laundry is out in the open at all times, right?
Right. Full transparency.
Yeah,
It's the positive spin there.
yeah. I mean, it definitely makes it an interesting community to observe and participate in a detached way.
See, I didn't know that Vitalik had a dad. I thought he was like immaculately conceived or something.
Really, I
And
met both of his parents in person.
right, well, I knew that you had met his mom, so I knew he had a mom.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, but then I see his dad like coming to his rescue in one of like the comments recently, and then he replies like "milady" to his dad as like thank you for defending him.
Mhm.
And yeah, then I noticed that his dad was wearing like a Ukraine shirt that had like a giant pulse on it.
I saw that you
And
shared that,
yeah.
and I thought that that was funny. So the first crypto t-shirt that I ever owned actually had like a pulse heartbeat on it, and it was like it was the Ethereum chart, right? Which but it reflected in a heartbeat, and then the saying on it was "You had me at ETH."
Nice.
So I thought it was funny. I'm like, yeah, he's not advertising Pulse Chain. I
Right.
promise that they're never gonna come out in support of it. But
But that would be some good family drama if you did.
yeah, it would be.
So, yeah. So like, what else do you have to say about like your relationship talk or like how that landed and stuff
Yeah,
like
so
that?
like I said, okay, so I was actually surprised. I thought that there would be more feedback in general, both like positive and negative, and there really wasn't very much, which really surprised me. I think that most of what people said was probably said in closed groups. Um, but yeah, so I think some things that I said kind of went over people's heads or didn't quite register, because I realized later that I have this like horrible habit of saying things without saying them. So I think I've made my point because it's very clear in the subtext, but I have not made my point because people don't know how to read subtext, or I'm not good at spelling out subtext. I'm not sure. There were a couple of things that I wanted to clarify. So I said in the sex and relationships talk, I talked about the first follower theory, and I didn't go too far into it, but I was explaining it's a sociological phenomenon where people who are joining a movement early emulate the first follower and not the leader. And I didn't get into this in this instance, but like in the case of the Hex community, it's really interesting that people were more apt to um, mimic Richard himself than like Richard's early followers. So I think that there's a couple of different ways of unpacking that. And potentially one of them is, Richard is like the product owner, right? So he's not the developer himself. And so I wonder if people somehow picked up on that, even though it wasn't like readily apparent, and then emulated Richard instead of the developers. Or I wonder if maybe it's because the developers were very behind the scenes. I'm not sure exactly how that played out. At some point, I would really like to ask Richard what he thinks, because he's aware of the first follower, phenomenon and my study of it and application to the community. So I think that would be a really interesting, I'm sure that he would have something valuable to say. And I'm also interested if anybody else has any insights relative to that they want to share, like hit me up, DM me, tag me, whatever. And so I wanted to just unpack that a little bit. The other way that I think that can be, so yeah, I guess there's a couple of different ways to unpack that. And I don't know exactly how to do it, but maybe that would be an interesting piece for me to write at some point. I think I would like to write that. Then the other, and sorry, my phone.
Oh, you're good. Yeah. So is there like an example to make it more clear in my mind, like what it looks like outside of our community when somebody has this first follower effect?
Yeah. Okay. So I will send you a link to it that you can look, but it's essentially like watching people at a music festival, right? And one guy starts dancing and, starts moving around. Maybe he's like playing a flute, whatever. And then someone else, his friend, his friend or someone who's with him starts like vibing out, and they're like the two of them vibing out, but they're not doing it the same way. The number 2 guy is doing it the number 2 way. The number 1 guy is doing it the number 1 way. Then as more people join, they follow number 2's example, not number 1's. So like 1 is dancing in this specific way and 1 and 2 is dancing, and they're more likely to follow 2 than 1.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
And so, but in the HEX community, people were following more along the lines of what Richard did rather than like Hexologist or RG3.
Yeah. But I mean, that also theoretically could be because Hexo and RG were emulating Richard, but still it's uncommon even for early followers to imitate. Maybe it's because number 2 was not apparent. Maybe it's because Richard was a substitute for number 2 because, for number 2 as the front the front facade of the project.
Yeah. Or I wonder if like, Richard was the number 2, like of Satoshi or something.
Yeah. Or Richard was the number 2. Yeah. There's that option too. So I really think that makes HEX a particularly fascinating case study. And I didn't spell that all out, so I wanted to. Another thing I wanted to say was I took a lot of flack for saying that people are delusional for like believing in core coins, but I wanted
that was a good one.
Yeah, so I wanted to specify that I don't think that people who believe in the core coins are delusional, like just believing in the core coins, but believing solely in the core coins, believing that nothing is going to outperform them, nothing can outperform them, and that people are better off only buying and only holding core coins is delusional. Not that, like, because my primary holdings are still in core coins. So like, it's not that I think that actually believing and holding the assets is delusional. It's that I think that believing that those assets and only those assets will save your crypto bags is the part that I believe is delusional.
I mean, I thought that was like a nice spicy take. Because it's different than what I normally hear. And like, the other side of the coin is like, people are always saying, oh, diversify. And I heard one like commentator once say like, when you diversify, you really die worse-ifying because you're spreading into things like you understand less. And so I think like there's a case like for both ways. I was just really pleased to hear somebody say something other than what everybody wanted to hear.
Really? Okay, so I didn't know that that's what people even wanted to hear anymore. I thought that like the spirit of maximalism was dead or dying in Pulse Chain, and I'm pretty sure like even since, right? So there have been some people who have reached out to me, privately via post to the conference and said things like, "Well, I am a maximalist, except for that I actually also hold other tokens." And I'm like, "Then you are not a pure maximalist, and a pure maximalist is what I was actually talking about." Because there are people who are afraid to talk about other things publicly because they believe that
Right.
there's a possibility that those assets will, rug or go to zero, and they don't want to be financially responsible. But I mean, at the same time, I feel like the criticism equally applies to those people because, listen, if you're holding core Richard Hart only assets and advising people to only hold and buy crypto Richard Hart only assets, you've been wrong for several years now. So like if
Right.
you've been giving bad advice already, I wouldn't worry so much about giving more bad advice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but still you're going to have some people like sticking with it and some people not. So,
But I mean, so I think this too, and I said this, but it may have been too brief, was that I said that there are some very good reasons for being maximalist that I can see like as justified, right? And one being I'm really busy with my day job. I don't have time, my day job and my family and everything else that I have going in my life. I don't have time to individually research all of these other small pop-up projects. Therefore, I am a maximalist, but that doesn't mean that I believe that everyone should be a maximalist. And that's a very different opinion that I didn't actually spell out, but I like that's valid in my mind.
are these like pure maximalists? Are they ones that are ever allowed to even have USDC or
Oh, okay.
like
So
what?
yeah, I would say that a pure maximalist is someone who holds Richard Hart only tokens, but stablecoins are also permitted. Ethereum is also permitted, and Bitcoin is also permitted, and so is Monero.
Monero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because
Yep.
it's got so much utility.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not a direct competitor with any of his existing products.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. But
Yeah.
Ethereum, yeah. Why does that make the list?
Well, because you actually need Ethereum to transact on the Ethereum network, and because Richard Hart himself holds a huge amount of Ethereum, so it's
Right.
possible because it's actually necessary, and because how can you say that someone is not a pure maximalist for holding the same asset that the the man who the class of people is named after is also holding?
Yeah, like I've heard people say
Holding
that
sentient.
ETH is a core coin because you need it to end your hex stakes on Ethereum.
Yep, 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 yep.
What do you think about Richard hating eHex?
Okay, I think it's really so I think that that's where his recent criticism of the community for not doing enough to market Ethereum is like particularly interesting because he himself bashed eHex not that long ago. So it's funny to say like, oh, all of you haven't been doing a good enough job marketing Ethereum when like you he himself criticized Ethereum by way of criticizing eHex. So I think that that's really really interesting. And I don't want to say this in a negative way because I'm not I'm not big on bashing people. But I think that that was like a pretty interesting take. I also don't think that Richard hates eHex. I think that I mean, it's the same contract as Hex on Pulse Chain, right? So it's not a hate for the asset, like so much as I don't know. I don't know what to say. And then there's also the possibility that if Richard was Hexalena, who is no longer around, and I don't know whether that's true or not, just I know that it's a common theory. So if you were to take for granted that Richard, say that we start with the premise that Richard was Hexalena specifically said long term eHex will perform as well as pHex. Because I said I was making a joke about how people who were saying that the two assets wouldn't mirror each other were lacking a fundamental understanding about how arbitrage works.
Yeah, I mean, like it has struck me that like there is a level of in like around like this concept of like being delusional, like maybe not delusional, but it seems like the EHEX crowd like has somewhat ignored Richard's tweets about EHEX. And yeah, like there might be bag bias there and all that kind of stuff, but it seems to me, which like I don't know why I don't hate or love EHEX. Like I'm just kind of like I'm kind of neutral about it. Like I don't really care if EHEX is like really successful or if like it dies. Like and that's like different than a lot of people's perspectives. But I just see it as like well, we have HEX somewhere and like that's good. But it seemed to me like my interpretation of Richard's tweets was like it's a waste of money to be like running to be giving EHEX value, like as long as it has value, that's going to make it profitable for people to end stakes no matter what the gas fees are. If the gas fees, require Hexicans to pay another $100 million, that's something that Richard seems like strongly against. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see like how that plays out going forward, because I'm pretty sure that gas fees will go up again on Ethereum at some point in the next year. And that, it'll be, it'll be interesting if Richard like bashes it again or not.
Well, and he's praised it since his initial message where he said that he thought that it was a waste of value. So I also thought that it was interesting that he said the market has decided, when there is this broader discussion that has been going on specifically for the last like year and a half between Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, where they're saying like, yeah, it's true that the market in the short term decided, but the market is never done deciding, right? Like, the market had decided that Oprah Winfrey was a more popular talk show host than Jerry Springer until Jerry Springer overtook Oprah. The market has decided nothing that's final. Like Pepsi could overtake Coke. These decisions are final, they're ongoing. The market is a living organism.
Right. Yeah. And like the gas problem could get solved on Ethereum, and that would mean something for EHEX, I think. We got Give Me Liberty or Give Me HEX. Says the new crown looks great.
Thank you.
Somebody says Richard is god of the crypto space. And Sami says, we love Maddie and Nerd Girl. Nerd Girl's great psychological breakdown of the Pulse Chain cults was really cool and useful framework too. Stars are aligning for Pulse Chain all over the place now.
Thanks, Sami. Yeah, I know he quoted me in one of his videos recently. Someone shared it. I was like, oh, nice. That's nice. A lot of people liked so it's funny because I didn't realize how little people knew or understood about the other sub communities, because people are like very, very siloed in their community for the most part, right? There are exceptions to the rule, but I had no idea that so many people who were part of Atropa had no idea about what's going on with the Tangang or the Corecoin Maximalists or the 9-inch crew. I had no idea that people who were part of these other groups like were virtually unaware of each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. Like before I discovered like St. Wolf, I didn't know that there was this whole group of people that, just deals with liquidity webs all day with Atropa.
Yeah. Well, but it's funny, the aspect of like understanding liquidity and how liquidity bonds work is universal to all four of the sub communities. Just they're unaware of each other's implementation of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the fact that he will stream for hours and like, I'm listening to it and I'm like, wow, I don't know anything these guys are talking about.
Mhm.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Like you said, siloed.
Yeah. But it's funny to me, it's very funny for the silos to already happen within a silo, right? So like the Hex and Pulse Chain community is its own silo, and then there's like these mini within it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, my second most popular tweet of all time is when I said, I was wrong about PDI.
Ah, okay. So you know what? Okay, so someone I shared the link and someone kind of was like, "Oh, Maddie has me blocked, but make sure that you tell him that he's behind the times and like PDI something, PDI this or PDI that." And I was like, "I don't think that Maddie is opposed to PDI. Like I really don't think that that's the case."
I was at one point. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I like, I don't know. I had bought some like when it first came out and like sold on a double, that would have been worth like, 60K now or something like that. And,
Mhm.
but I only made like $200 off of it. And then, after that, like there's, I just, every time I heard about it, people were saying, oh, Richard is speaking through the chain.
Mhm.
And there were like some minor data points, like Richard had hidden a comment about PETA or something. And so I like strongly took the opinion, oh, yeah, like Richard is not speaking. And these people are, you know, they're trying to promote this idea, using his name. And I didn't agree with that. And so that's probably what like got me to stay away from it for so long. And
Mhm.
then, once it hit a penny, then I was like, oh, wow. Then all the ideas came flooding back of like, all the game theory that we would talk about before Pulse Chain launched,
I was gonna say,
especially with, yeah.
yeah. Right after, so I remember right after Pulse Chain was announced, before the sacrifice had even begun, you, Blaze, and me and someone else were doing a stream and we talked about what about stable coins, and we even went through it and we were like, well, it wouldn't work for USDC or USDT, so if there was a chance of one of them pegging, it would have to be DAI.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But so, and this was like before the Pulse Chain, like before you could even sacrifice for it, in the days after the fork was announced. So
That's
yeah.
right.
But okay, so you said that what the majority wanted to hear was like hold core coin assets, but is that really true anymore? Because I heard a lot of criticism about the conference itself, saying that there were far too many people speaking at a Hex conference about, negative things about Hex. And I just really thought that um that that the mindset that like only the core coins are good was significantly, decreased over, after years of seeing horrible price performance relative to virtually everything else in the crypto space. And also that you would be surprised that I would say that, because I've always been critical of maximalism.
Last year, the main criticism was that it wasn't inclusive enough of
Mm-hmm.
people who were non-maxis. So, for example, like PDI in particular, ended up getting like a talk like after the conference was over one day or something. Like I played their stream or like at the end of one of the days, because there was so much outcry to like add more to it. And then this year, it was almost the opposite, that people were saying, well, there were too many people on who have created their own thing or who are not maximalist enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like that's particularly interesting to me, that like how much it swung back and forth in the past year. Yeah. And then, yeah, so that was kind of an interesting criticism that, that in some ways, like I don't have, so yeah, I should say I don't, there's only so much control I have over like what people will say when I bring them on. And like, I've like alluded that the rules are, hey, like this is a Hex conference, so let's talk about Hex. But I'm not sitting there, policing people's speech. And that's something that has come up with the Hex badges that I saw you commented on once and recognized. And something I'm very proud of is that, unlike the Bitcoin conference, which I had brunch with Ross Ulbricht's mom, and like she got her speaking spot taken away when she was already in Miami. They like cut her because she had done an NFT project to raise money for her son, Ross Ulbricht. And then, and it became clear to me at that moment of how the quote unquote Bitcoin royalty, like how they get controlled. That was the same year that Robert Breedlove was starting to question whether there's a second best to Bitcoin. And, I assume he was given the same like treatment that you don't get to speak at the Bitcoin conference if you're not a maximalist. And so they're policing people's speech throughout the year and what they're doing throughout the year. Whereas with the Hex conference, I'm proud that, and the badges and everything, like people can say whatever they want as long as it's not bullying people or breaking the Twitter rules. But then at the conference, we can focus on Hex.
Right. And I get that. And that's what I said is like, well, for one thing, like I've always been opposed to maximalism, and I've always been vocally spoken out against it. I think that you can attest to that because you've been, part of the community for long enough to know that from the very outset, I said that there was absolutely no chance that I would ever become a maximalist of any kind. And that I never would have accepted a badge, nor would I have been offered a badge if maximalism had been part of the deal. Like, not only would I have said no, but you wouldn't have asked, because everyone knows that I, do not believe in the practice of maximalism, or not I don't believe in it, that I do not subscribe to the practice.
So I think it's really interesting, like just from a social psychology point of view, that I'm like particularly trying to do things differently than the Bitcoin conference has gone. And we'll see whether that works or not.
Well, so I saw that, a couple of days ago, you said that you were sunsetting the HEX badge program over the next few days and considering sunsetting the Pulse Chain badge program as well.
Yeah. So, I ended up walking that back a little bit and like doing a poll, and the amount of support for it kind of, offset like the death threats and stuff that I was getting at that point. And so, now I'm working on a way to try to keep the badges, basically because we're getting an extra 78 million views a year, on, just on the Hex side of things, and the Pulse Chain side, almost as much. And so that seems really valuable. And I think like the amount of support that people have shown for it makes me want to keep doing the difficult task,
of maintaining the program.
Yeah. It's difficult.
I understand. So here's one criticism that was posted about me regarding my talks was, why was I talking about Pulse Chain at a HEX conference? And I thought that was a really weird criticism to have, because Pulse Chain and HEX are inextricable, they're not possible to be separated from one another at this stage. So they are like two trees whose roots have grown and fused together. You cannot say that only HEX should be discussed at the HEX conference when Pulse Chain is such an integral part of it. So I wonder if it wouldn't be advantageous to make both conferences HEX Pulse Chain conferences.
Yeah, I think in the speaker sign up portion, there are a lot of possible topics that are presented in a giant list, for people to indicate oh, here's some, and part of that is to match people on panels, but another part is just to make it so that people can think of what types of topics they'll discuss at the conference. And so, yeah, the HEX conference is designed to have some some pulse chain discussions in there.
Mhm.
But like the level of structure is like for most panels, I'm not telling them what to discuss. Uh,
Mhm.
and so again, like it's kind of that's the medium that I've seen maybe is what would work. And I think other times I've like, put like a super short title, 3 or 4 words, and like that's maybe just the starting point for where people go. But yeah, I think like having them as two distinct conferences, like I still like that aspect. But yeah, I think that that the criticism, I mean, people are going to criticize keeping the hex badges, and some of the same people are going to criticize taking them away.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
like,
it's one of those things that's like people just like people who are upset or who are just unhappy in general love to spread their unhappiness and they love to complain. People complain just to complain, right? So it's the same people who were criticizing, and I saw a lot of criticism of the Hex conference about, oh, it's just the same things everyone's saying. And the same people who were criticizing about that criticized my presentations that were like radically
right.
different from what has ever before. So I thought like, okay, that's kind of funny because it just doesn't those do you can't criticize opposing views at the same time without nullifying your criticism. So, but people do, people love to complain that like they're going to be upset about things no matter what. And that's just the reality, like it's a shitty reality, but it's the way it is.
There's this psychologist Rob Henderson on Twitter, and I like keep running into him at like conferences, and he actually had a course on Peterson Academy, Jordan Peterson's like attempt to replace colleges and stuff, and I had seen he did a class on social psychology, so I had started taking his classes, and there was one episode where he's explaining that with I don't know, with monkeys or some kind of like primate, whenever they take the leader away, the monkeys will kill each other until they know what the new hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it just it
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of our ecosystem here, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm not sure what to do with that, but
The power vacuum in the absence of leadership. Yeah.
and so that's actually part of what made me consider keeping the badges is that I kind of in reflecting I realized like, well, if we take away this like structure, even though it's imperfect and like all that, like that could lead to even more infighting than like a lot more than even there has been. I don't know.
Maybe. I think it's kind of similar to when Elon took over X and then like nullified the old verification system so that not only could anyone become verified for a subscription fee, but that all of the legacy verification would go away unless those people decided to also subscribe. And then the like in the months that followed, if you were a verified account posting in an unverified space, it was like this idiot pays for Twitter. It's just like it's the
Right.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see like do you think Richard's going to come back?
I don't know. I don't want to speculate on it because I don't know what's going, I don't like talk to him. I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know what his plans are. I would hope for the sake of the tokens and the community at large that he will come back, but I don't know.
I think he'll be back.
So I think that he'll be back if there's glory to be had for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy like the how the SEC keeps like keeps messing with us.
Mhm.
Um But yeah, I'm starting a new tweeting campaign against the SEC, because I just got my second subpoena. Yay!
Mhm.
So this is not like a third round of subpoenas, but they just didn't know how to like spell my name or like my address or anything. So like mine got lost from like the subpoenas that went out a month ago.
Mhm.
Um, but even think about a month ago, we had already had the court hearing in NYC, and it's more proof that like the process is the punishment, because I got debanked. I got Operation Choke Point 2.0 from the first round of subpoenas. My bank said, "Come get your shit and get out,"
Mhm.
basically. And yeah, so like I'm fired up, and I'm not too happy with like the SEC doing this second round to basically ask the same thing.
Yeah. I that doesn't sound like fun. I don't envy you.
But yeah, like it gives me an idea of like, all this, everything Richard's going through. And yeah, so I think like um that's got a big part. His streaming had a big part in what they're going after him for. So yeah, I think once that gets settled, there's I think he'll be back.
So here's a
But
question
we'll see.
for you, and I don't care about the answer at all. Like this is something that I've always thought was really silly with the community, but but there were a lot of people who were very upset when Richard unfollowed everyone. Um,
Mm.
and I know you did a long breakdown of it. I didn't watch it. I'm sorry. But I got the highlight reel. And but so I wonder, what do you think that he will refollow worthy accounts when he returns, or will he remain following zero for the like prestige of it?
Well, I luckily I don't remember anything I said in my previous analysis.
Okay.
But yeah, based on like your question, I do predict that Richard will start following people in the community again, because um, he's it seems like he's always had an attitude of like a meritocracy,
Mhm.
where he does want to signal who's doing a good job. For example, whenever he was following and unfollowing dollar cost crypto so many times,
Mhm.
that seemed like, it was a communication to Miguel and to others, what Richard basically, like what Richard was trying to communicate to his followers, and like what he believes in. Um, yeah, so that kind of gives me like an interesting question to ask you.
Mhm.
Like, what do you think about the difference between when people come to the community and they tell you basically, I'm going to be into multiple stuff, and then like, they get a pass for forever, versus somebody who comes to the community and they're like, I'm all hex or all pulse chain. And then they start to branch out into other things, and people like are not okay with that. People like want to burn them at the stake.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that is like that people should expect people to naturally delve into other things, because it's just not like the level of maximalism that we see people. Oh, I'm 100% hex maximalist, RH maximalist. Like you should understand that the people who come in with that mindset just haven't understood yet everything that can be done on a chain and why a chain needs more than its core assets. So if people come with the mindset, oh, I'm only buying core assets, it's because they don't yet understand that actually anything that is built on the chain is a level of supporting the chain. Now, like there's tons and tons of scams. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to give the give the opinion that everything built on pulse chain is good because it all supports pulse chain, but that's not true. But that it's normal for people to branch out after a while. And I don't think I don't think that like there's I don't think that people should be criticized for holding other assets. And also, just to go back to this question about Richard following and unfollowing people, I don't think he will follow people back again. And
Because of what?
because of what I just said. So
Okay.
because it is necessary for the marketing and support of the chain for multiple things to be built on it. And if Richard comes back and starts following people and he's only following people who talk only about assets that he supports and is behind, then that is an incentive for other people to not talk about anything else. And that's a net negative for the chain.
Interesting.
So yeah. And yeah, that's my hypothesis.
Okay. Yeah, like I could see it going either way. Do you think that well, okay. Yeah, I mean this is like a multi-part question, I guess, but like, if the price ever goes up again, then do you think we'll see like people's behavior changing in terms of how much they're infighting and hating and like,
Yes.
I see people being so mean to Dipcatcher. Like Dipcatcher is like such a valuable community member in my mind because he can say things that people don't like. So yeah, I'm wondering like,
I know people talk like, I don't know, I think it's similar to criticism that people have of me, right? Like I like Tantonomi, but I don't really care that people say things. Yeah, I don't really care if people say things that I disagree with, even.
that was the also like his talk and your talk were like the most hated, yeah, by far, like the
At least
most
there was a lot of
complaints.
hate for mine.
Yeah, like yeah, people were mad about your talk and about his talk
Okay.
specifically.
Okay. I didn't know because I did not look at the comments like very intentionally.
So how have you survived so long in like the social media space? Like what is it that you do for your mental health to deal with the haters other than not looking at the comments during your talk at the conference?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, one thing is like if you don't have haters, you're doing it wrong, right? So I like very firmly stand by and believe that maxim. So every time that someone hates, I'm like, oh, I just did something right, you know? And then separately from that, it's that I have like a healthy normal life outside of the hex community, outside of X, right? Like I have a daughter who loves me, she doesn't care what I say on stream. Like I have a relationship with someone who thinks that all of my like poking at bears is funny. So so you know like I have friends, they don't follow me, or they, if they do, they follow me because they think I'm funny, not because they actually care about the crypto thing. So I think that what I do for my mental health is place a much higher premium on the opinions of the people who actually know me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Having the right balance between social media and the real world.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like I've taken heat from the hex community from the very beginning, so I knew what I was getting into. I've always known what I'm a part of, and over the years, a lot of people have said really negative things to me or completely criticized my academic hypotheses, and later come to me and said, yeah, after watching this play out, you were 100% right, and I'm sorry for having been mean to you. And I feel like part of what gets me through it is is I mean, being open to the possibility that I can be wrong, but in very many instances knowing that I'm certain.
Right. Yeah.
So other people's
That
opinions
helps.
don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, that helps.
But I don't mean that in like a really arrogant way, right? Because I am open to being wrong, right? Like even I said at the beginning of my second presentation about the sociology, I stated my hypothesis and then debunked my hypothesis, right? So like I can admit that I'm wrong sometimes.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, I had to choose between like like doing something that'd be unpopular versus like not continuing my journey of learning in crypto. And that was with like the Maddie token,
Mm-hmm.
which like it was particularly interesting to me because I talked about it in a way that suggested that it could never go higher than $20.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lot different than like a lot of other tokens, that are saying, oh, yeah, it's great if we do 100x, like, you know, from when people get into it and stuff. And yeah, like even with that, I guess even with that cap on people's greed, it still became something where, people who didn't even participate in it are, calling foul without even looking on chain or knowing like
Mm-hmm.
any of the details. So yeah, that really taught me so much and like has continued to teach me so much about crypto by doing something that pretty much like got me more hate than I could almost handle at first. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it's interesting how the social psychology of all this goes.
Well, I think, okay, so I know that we're coming to the end of this time, but I also want to just mention this because I know a lot of people don't remember that one of Richard's like most iconic sayings from even before the days of Hex were that if you are not saying something because you're afraid that the people who follow you will unfollow you, you aren't a leader.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also thought that that was funny, like, because there were so many people before the mass unfollowing who were holding other assets, who did like other assets, but who would not tweet about them for fear that Richard would unfollow them. So
Mm-hmm.
when the mass unfollowing happened, I was like, thank God, like
Right.
about time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you could see what people really thought.
Well, and not just see what people really thought, but it also freed people from I don't know how to word this, right? Like it was essentially granting permission to anyone to say whatever they really wanted to say, without being specifically punitive to a few. And at the same time, because, there were people like, because he's not monitoring social media as closely anymore, right? Like there were people who were talking about other things that would have been unfollowed if he had noticed it. So it was like
Mm.
he's a measure of fairness and I think balance for the chain.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you think Richard is behind PDI or like do you think that PDI will peg
Okay.
$2?
So I think it would be awesome if PDI pegged to $1. I think that if that were to happen, it would be like the best upward momentum, positive aspect for bringing people to Pulse Chain. I do think that that is the strongest onboarding narrative that we as a community share. I also think it's really interesting that, like, with the existence of the possibility that Richard is behind PDI, it actually means that in some people's interpretation, they can still be a Richard Hart maximalist while holding and supporting PDI. So it makes that like whole sociological unpacking even more complicated. Um,
Right.
I think that it would be a brilliant marketing and PR move were that to happen, because media outlets and just like regular people who report on crypto who don't typically report about anything related to HexChain and Pulse would be forced to acknowledge that it happened. And
Right.
it would mean a lot of people who are holding large amounts of PDI right now and don't even know it or don't even care and would come over. So
Yeah.
I think that like all of that is really interesting. I crap posted a few weeks ago, just mocking the proposition, not mocking the idea that it could be that Richard is behind PDI, but mocking the logic for the core of Sami's argument, which was PDI has a huge market cap on Pulse Chain. If it were to go under, it would devastate all of Pulse Chain. Richard has never spoken out against PDI. Richard usually speaks out against chain or, against products that he believes are scams. Therefore, Richard is behind PDI. And I'm like, there's a flaw. I said, there's a fundamental flaw in the logic. And the PDI community came at me really hard. And I was like, hey, I never said that Richard couldn't be behind PDI. I said that there's a flaw in the logic. There's a logical leap between one point and the next, and that the argument itself is neither sound nor valid. And they're like, oh, you're using boomer logic. And I'm like, I'm not using boomer logic. I'm using formal logic,
Right.
I'm not saying that formal logic is the only way of understanding things. I'm saying that I was I framed it that way in intentional, right? I actually think, I don't know, necessarily if Richard is behind it, right? But I think that the probability that it's either him or someone who he knows and trusts very closely, seems high.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And are you like going to be working with the marketing efforts in that regard?
Okay, so Decentralize Me put up a not a GoFundMe, but a donut, a wallet address for people to donate for the marketing efforts to hire a professional company to help market Hex and Pulse Chain and do some repairing PR for Richard. As someone who works in cryptocurrency marketing, I was really enthusiastic about that. And I reached out to him and I was like, hey, can I help you? And we did a bunch of interviews with several different crypto PR and marketing firms and are right now in the process of reviewing their proposals. So the marketing firm that I work for is not in the mix at all. So I know people have kind of been critical of that. She's just trying to get paid for this. In fact, that's not true. I will not be compensated for any of the efforts. I'm really just, as someone who knows what good crypto marketing looks like, I'm kind of helping to make sure that the firm that is hired is going to be able to deliver on their promises.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be nice. To have more branches of the marketing arm and everything.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the biggest, in my opinion, so there's a few different perspectives on, what the funds should be focused on. My perspective is that one of the most important elements is PR placements with do follow backlinks on websites that have high domain authority, because that's the only way that we're ever going to cancel out all of the negative things that you see when you Google Richard Hart, Hex, or Pulse Chain. So it's not like we're going to be able to take over page one, but we have to actually get ranked onto page one. Not even talking about CoinMarketCap, but there have to be some positive results on the search page, because otherwise onboarding will always be a nightmare.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's great that you're helping out there. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's doing most of the heavy lift. I'm kind of just checking things in the background, right? There are some agencies who claim that they've worked with this project, and this project. And as someone who has the ability to contact those projects, I'm able to confirm or not confirm that actually happened.
Nice. Yeah, that verify, right? That's a big part of crypto.
Mm-hmm. And the number of people who are lying, the number of false reports of this or that is astonishing.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other takeaways that you want people to get from the talks that you did, or from the topics we've discussed here?
No, I mean, I would hope that people who are critical of the, dating, sex, and relationships piece would understand that it's not meant to speak to people who are already part of the community, who already have an understanding of complex concepts. It's to speak to people who don't, and that's necessary. It is, and it maybe is not necessary to use sex and relationships as metaphors, but I mean, why not, right? Why not use? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand what the huge problem is. I guess also people were making fun of me for being 40. And I'm like, why is that funny? Like, why is my age an insult? Did I have any control over when I was born? Like, so weird to insult someone based on their age. Oh, I'm a slut because I did that sex and relationship talk. That was one. I mean, sure, I guess. Name someone I've slept with then. And yeah.
Yeah. So people, they like scroll through like, all the insults and try to see like what lands. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think people are, yeah, they're, I mean, I like this idea, yeah, that people are just commenting on the color of the candle and that sort of thing. Like, seems
Yeah.
pretty true. But it's been so long since we had nothing but green candles and up only. It'll be interesting to see like what good behaviors come back when that happens and everything. Like, yeah, I mean, we're like 2x higher than we were at the previous Hex conference, and yet there was more infighting. So yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see, and I guess there was this one more subtext point. We got off on like so many conversations. We could probably keep going for another hour, but can't, but we could. But so there was this other aspect that I guess I was saying without saying, and I didn't even realize it until after the conference was over, but that each of the pulse chain sub communities offers something unique that could be harnessed and used together in a way that's collaborative and creative, right? Like I said, the Tang Gang is amazing at memes. Like there's no denying that, right? Like whether you love them or hate them, you can't
Right.
really deny that they're really good at making memes. And memes are
Yeah.
the memes are the currency of the internet. So
Right.
we should be utilizing that amazing skill and using their memes, using like their creative memetics to advertise pulse chain. And then there's that the Atropa people have the strongest onboarding narrative, and they do, because PDI
Right.
or PWBTC, any P assets pegging is an amazing onboarding narrative, and it's even the one that Richard suggested was the best.
Right.
From the outset. So it's why the entire chain was forked and not just the token itself. So, getting behind that narrative, or if you don't want to get behind the PDI narrative for fear that it's wrong, then at least not attacking people for using the narrative that is the strongest. And then I think I said the 9-inch crew has pretty much all of the biggest Hex and Pulse Chain influencers, and it's where big name influencers like Ben Armstrong launched his meme token. So
Mm-hmm.
utilizing the network effect and the viewership effect behind 9-inch, like these things could all be used in a cohesive way so that it would maximize the reach instead of bashing on each other for not having all of the same pieces. And also, just throw this out there, Tangang being super critical of Richard himself is in itself appealing to a lot of outsiders who might be open to the possibility of using the chain, but not open to the possibility of kissing Richard's butt.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so valuable. I'm glad you crystallized all that.
Thank you for reminding me at the end there that there was a point. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Cool. Well, everybody hit the like and subscribe button and share this out. Where can people find more of your content?
I'm just posting whatever comes to my mind on X. And then I write for like various crypto media outlets, but whenever I do that, I share it on X.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on Hex Therapy Live. It's been a really long time since I've had like a guest on this this particular like show, and yeah, you did a great job.
You remember the time that I was like getting a lot of pushback from the community? It was years ago, and so I like set everything up so that I was laying on my couch during the therapy session.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Wow, it's been years of streaming together and everything, and I had forgotten that you and Blaze and we did multiple episodes together.
Yep. Well, and then it was you, me, Blaze, and the Joker, because it was
yeah,
because it was like psychology and social psychology professionals.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for sticking around and for coming on the conferences and everything. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me present such a different content.
My pleasure. Yeah, I got to keep these conferences fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. With that being said, until next time, stake wisely, my friends, and peace out.
It's from Maddie Allen of HEX Therapy Live. I like Maddie. Maddie tries to make the world a healthier place. He's a mental health professional. He's done research.
Videos on sudden wealth syndrome.
There's nothing that a human being could do better than try and heal his fellow man.
Maddie Allen's got that covered. He does emotional, feel-good, mind management, emotion stuff like as his gig because he's a therapist. That's what he does for a living. Like he helps heal people.